A grieving man uncovers a series of letters from his deceased brother, each revealing unsettling truths. As he delves deeper, reality begins to unravel. Stay till the twist. The first letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, slipping through the mail slot as the wind howled outside. Michael stood in the dim hallway, staring at the yellowed envelope resting on the worn doormat. The paper was aged, its corners dog-eared and the ink on the address smudged by rain. There was no return address, but the handwriting was painfully familiar. Daniel's. His brother had been dead for 12 years, and yet here it was, his unmistakable script. Michael's heart pounded as he picked it up, the faint scent of mildew clinging to the paper. He opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means the first step has been taken. You must remember what happened that night. The truth is buried, but it's not forgotten. Don't ignore this. Yours, Daniel," he read it again and again, each time his pulse quickening. The truth? That night? What was Daniel trying to tell him? Michael shook his head, folding the letter carefully and sliding it into his jacket pocket. He convinced himself it had to be a cruel joke, someone playing on his grief, trying to stir up the past. He tried to forget about it, to push it out of his mind. But that night he dreamt of Daniel, pale and thin, standing at the foot of his bed, lips moving but no sound coming out. The second letter arrived a week later, delivered by the same invisible hand, the same envelope, the same handwriting. "Michael, time is slipping away. You need to remember. Go to the cabin, the lake, the fireflies. You'll find what you need there. Daniel, the cabin, their family's retreat at Lake Serenity, a place of childhood laughter and summer swims, of campfires and ghost stories. They hadn't been there since their father's death. Michael hadn't thought of it in years. He felt an ache in his chest as he read the letter again. It wasn't just a prank. This was too deliberate, too personal. The cabin held memories, some good, some shrouded in shadow. He couldn't resist the pull any longer. He took a leave of absence from work, packed a duffel bag, and drove the 3 hours north, the road winding through dense forest, the lake shimmering silver in the late afternoon light. The cabin stood as it always had, though. The years had not been kind. The paint was peeling, the shutters hung askew, and the roof sagged beneath the weight of fallen branches. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. He pushed the door open, the hinges protesting with a groan. Inside, it was a time capsule of his youth, dusty furniture, old blankets folded neatly on the couch, a cracked photo of their parents on the mantel. He walked through the rooms slowly, memories surfacing with each step. The kitchen where they'd cooked marshmallows over the stove, the living room where they'd built pillow forts and told scary stories. But there was something else too, a sense of unease, of something lurking just beyond memory's reach. That night, he built a fire in the hearth and sat in the old armchair, the flickering light casting shadows that danced across the walls.
Sleep came in fitful bursts, dreams filled with the sound of water lapping at the shore, of laughter echoing in the dark, and a voice whispering his name. He woke to find the third letter waiting for him on the porch, the early morning fog coiling
around the cabin like a living thing. "Michael, you're close. The truth lies beneath. Dig where the old oak once stood." Daniel, the old oak. He remembered it, a massive tree that had stood behind the cabin, struck by lightning during a summer storm. Only a rotting stump remained now, the earth around it soft and damp. He found a rusted shovel in the shed and began to dig. The soil was dense and heavy, each shovelful a strain on his arms. As the sun climbed higher, he worked, sweat soaking his shirt, breath ragged in the chill morning air. Hours passed. Just as he was ready to give up, the shovel struck something solid. He dropped to his knees, clearing away the dirt with his hands. A metal box, corroded and ancient, lay half buried in the earth. He pried it open, the hinges squealing in protest. Inside were photographs, yellowed with age. Michael and Daniel as children, arms around each other, smiling wide. But in one photo, a third boy stood between them, his face smudged, features indistinct. Michael didn't recognize him, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood, hand on Daniel's shoulder, staring directly at the camera. There were newspaper clippings, too. "Local boy missing," read one headline. "Search called off after 2 weeks." Michael scanned the articles, the words swimming before his eyes. The boy's name was Thomas, 10 years old. Disappeared from the lake one summer night, never seen again. He dropped the papers, his hands shaking. He didn't remember Thomas. He didn't remember any of it. The last item in the box was a journal, its leather cover cracked and brittle. He opened it, the pages filled with Daniel's careful handwriting. July 14th. Michael doesn't remember. He never remembers. I don't know why. I see Thomas every night, in the corner of my room, in the reflection of the lake. He's waiting for me to tell the truth. I have to make Michael see. Michael's breath caught in his throat. What truth? What had happened to Thomas? The entries grew more frantic as he read on, Daniel's words dissolving into gibberish and scribbles. Faces in the dark, voices in the walls, the weight of secrets that threatened to crush him. He closed the journal, the words seared into his mind. He didn't understand, but he knew he couldn't leave. He had to know what happened. That night, he dreamed again. He stood on the shore of the lake, the moon huge and full above him. Daniel stood beside him, older than he remembered, his eyes hollow. "You have to remember," Daniel said, his voice a hollow echo. "You have to." Michael woke with a start, sweat cold on his skin. The air in the cabin was heavy, the silence pressing in on him. He rose and dressed, the letters tucked into his jacket pocket like talismans. He walked down to the lake, the water black and still beneath the moonlight. He stood at the edge, staring into the depths. A memory surfaced, dim and flickering. He and Daniel playing by the water, their laughter ringing out across the lake. And Thomas. He saw the boy's face now, pale and freckled, eyes wide with fear. The memory shifted. A struggle, water churning. Thomas's hands reaching out, grabbing at Michael's shirt. A shout, a splash. Then silence. Michael fell to his knees, the memory crashing over him like a wave. He had pushed Thomas. Not out of malice, just a game that had gone too far. But Thomas had never surfaced. He staggered back to the cabin, the weight of the memory suffocating. He read the letters again. Daniel's. Desperate pleas for him to remember. He saw now why Daniel had been so haunted, why he had never been the same after that summer. The next morning, he found the fourth letter on the kitchen table, though he hadn't seen or heard anyone approach the cabin. "Michael, you remember. Now. Good. But that's not enough. Thomas is still here. You have to set him free. You have to confess. Daniel, set him free." Confess. Michael didn't know how. He felt the walls of the cabin closing in, the air thick with the scent of damp, earth and old memories. He heard whispers in the corners of the room, the soft susurration of water against the shore. That night he lit a lantern and walked back to the lake. The water was calm, the reflection of the moon shimmering on its surface. He stepped into the shallows, the cold seeping into his bones. He spoke aloud, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Thomas. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." The water rippled, a shadow moving beneath the surface. He froze, breath caught in his throat. The shadow rose, and for a moment he thought he saw a face, a boy's face, pale and dripping, eyes dark and hollow. "I'm sorry," Michael whispered again. The water stilled, the shadow sinking back into the depths. He staggered back to the shore, the weight in his chest lifting slightly. He returned to the cabin, exhausted, and slept a dreamless sleep for the first time in weeks. When he woke, the 5th letter was waiting on his pillow. "Michael, you've taken the first step. But there's more. Thomas was never the only one. Look in the cellar, Daniel." The cellar door was hidden beneath a threadbare rug in the kitchen. Michael had forgotten it even existed. He pulled the rug aside and lifted the trapdoor, the darkness yawning below. He descended the narrow steps, the air cold and damp, the smell of mildew thick in his nose. At the bottom, he found another box, this one newer, its metal polished and gleaming. He opened it, and his breath caught. Bones. Small bones, yellowed, with age, carefully arranged and bound with twine. Beside them, a bundle of letters tied with a red ribbon. He untied the ribbon, hands shaking. The letters were in Daniel's hand. "Michael, I tried to keep them safe. I tried to bury the past, but it keeps coming back. You have to finish what I started. You have to burn it all. Burn it all." Michael felt a cold certainty settle over him. He carried the box up the steps, out to the fire pit behind the cabin. He doused the bones and letters in kerosene and struck a match. The flames roared to life, the smoke acrid and black. He watched as the bones cracked and crumbled, the letters curling into ash. The air smelled of burnt paper and something else, something sweet and cloying. As the fire died down, he felt a strange calm wash over him. The weight of the past was gone, consumed by the flames. But that night, he woke to a cold hand on his face. He opened his eyes to see Daniel standing over him, eyes hollow and black. "You can't burn the truth," Daniel whispered. "You can't." Michael tried to speak, but no sound came out. Daniel leaned closer, his breath icy against Michael's skin. "You belong here now," he said. When Michael woke, he was standing at the edge of the lake, the water lapping at his feet. The sun was just beginning to rise, the sky streaked with red. He felt empty, hollowed out. The letters, the bones, the memories, they were all gone. All that remained was the water and the whisper of Daniel's voice in his ear. "You belong here." Itai walked into the lake, the water cold and dark around his ankles, his knees, his waist. He kept walking until the water closed over his head, the silence of the depths enveloping him. He didn't struggle. He didn't fight. He let the water take him, the cold wrapping around him like a shroud. The last thing he saw was the cabin, its windows dark and empty, the smoke from the fire pit still rising in thin, twisting tendrils. Then nothing. The letters stopped coming after that. The cabin stood empty, the lake still and silent. Some nights, if the wind was right, you could hear laughter drifting across the water, faint and echoing. But no one ever found Michael, and no one ever found the truth. Because some secrets are meant to stay buried forever. Peter heard a voice whispering from the television, low, grating, and impossible to understand. But it wasn't the voice that truly disturbed him. It was the face in the static, watching him back. Stay till the twist. Peter didn't know. When the TV had turned itself on, he'd gone to bed early, worn out from another long day at the archives, the kind of exhaustion that pushed straight through to the bone. Yet at 3:17 a.m., something nudged him awake. Not a sound, but a sensation, like someone was staring through the walls. His room was dark, except for a soft flicker from the living room. He padded down the hallway, barefoot on cold wooden floors, and found the television humming softly, pale gray light fluttering over the furniture. It was on the static channel. He hadn't touched the remote. Peter blinked and rubbed his eyes. Maybe the power had flickered and the system reset itself. Maybe the remote had fallen, pressed something. That had to be it. He bent to turn it off, hand reaching for the power button. The static hissed, then whispered. It wasn't white noise, not anymore. He froze. The sound took on shape, like a voice stretched too thin over glass. Not words exactly, more the cadence of a whisper. A directionless, steady murmur, like someone trying to speak through water. "Hello?" he said before he could stop himself. The static didn't respond. It simply shifted, subtly. The way a face might when trying to smile. Peter turned the TV off and went back to bed. He dreamed of drowning in wires. The next day passed without incident. Peter buried himself in work, cataloging old, dusty microfilm records from the 70s for the university's digitization project. He didn't think about the TV again until that night when it turned itself back on. Same time. Same channel. He watched the screen from the doorway, unmoving. There was something different about the static. Not just its presence, but its texture. The noise was more rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. Within the haze, he thought he saw shapes. An outline of a head, shoulders, something long-fingered flickering at the edge of perception. This time, the voice was clearer. Peter. He nearly dropped the glass in his hand. He stepped backward. The TV kept whispering his name. Peter. 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 He turned the screen off again, pulled the plug from the socket. This was insane. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe he was finally burning out. He didn't sleep much these days. But even unplugged, he could still hear it. The faint crackle of white noise behind the walls. 3 days later, he brought home an old television from the university archives. One of the analog CRT sets with dial knobs and thick glass. It was a joke at first, a test. He set it up next to his own flat screen and left it unplugged. That night, the modern TV turned on again. Static, 3:17 a.m. And this time, so did the old one. It shouldn't have been able to. It had no power. Yet the screen flared to life with the same gray-white fog. Peter stepped forward, eyes wide, mouth dry. Both screens hissed in perfect unison, like a breath drawn through cracked teeth. And then, a shape stepped out of the static, not out of the TV, not physically, but the image clarified for the briefest moment, and Peter saw a man, gaunt, hairless. No eyes, skin the color of dry paper, standing motionless in the mist. Peter staggered backward, breath hitching. The screens blinked black. He visited a therapist the next morning. Dr. Calloway was a practical man, not the kind to jump to conclusions. Peter explained everything, the noise, the visions, the voice in the static. "It sounds like a hypnagogic hallucination," Calloway said gently, "common in people with sleep deprivation, stress, isolation, a mind overstimulated at the edge of rest." "But the unplugged TV turned on," Peter said. "It showed the same thing. At the same time." Calloway frowned slightly. "Hallucinations can involve external projection. You may have seen what you expected to see." "I saw a man." "What kind of man?" Peter hesitated. He had no eyes, but he was watching me. The therapist's pen paused. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." Peter left the office with sleeping pills and a referral to a neurologist. He never filled the prescription. The noise spread. It started in the bedroom, a faint hum, like a detuned radio buried beneath the drywall. Then, the bathroom mirror began to flicker at its edges. Every reflective surface carried a shimmer of static. His laptop glitched when he opened the camera. One night the man stepped closer. Peter was already sitting in front of the TV when the screen came on, not waiting, but resigned. He stared into the swirling fog, breathing shallow. This time, the figure emerged clearly. A face formed out of snow and gray. It smiled, and the whisper came again. "Do you remember me?" Peter's head jerked. He didn't. But something inside him recoiled, as though a forgotten part of him recognized the voice. "You let me in," the voice hissed. "When?" Peter whispered. The man in the static leaned forward, his eyeless sockets widening, stretching. "When?" "You were 6. Peter dug through the attic, boxes, old clothes, school projects, photo albums. Then he found it, a stack of VHS tapes, most unlabeled. One tape had his name on it in black marker. Just Peter. He didn't own a VCR anymore. He borrowed one from the archives. That night, he slid the tape in. It began with static. Then a birthday, party, balloons, cake, a small boy, himself. Age 6, laughing with cousins. Then the screen flickered. The footage jumped. Suddenly, the child Peter stood alone in front of the TV. The same old CRT model he had in his living room now. The screen behind him buzzed softly. He turned toward it, and the man in the static looked back. Peter woke up with blood under his fingernails. He didn't remember falling asleep. He didn't remember tearing his bedsheets or scratching his arms raw, but the whisper in his head was louder now, clearer. "Do you remember what you did?" The next day at work, he accessed archived medical records. He'd never thought about his childhood much. There were gaps, sure, but what kid remembers everything? He found a report, dated 1992, his name, a hospital admission, self-inflicted injury, minor lacerations, complaints of a man in the television, referred to psychiatric evaluation. Peter stared at the screen. He hadn't remembered any of this. Had his parents ever told him? They were gone now, dead 6 years. He never remembered seeing any psychiatrist. The static became constant. He unplugged everything. TVs, computers, lights. But still, the hiss followed him. From vents, from drains, from behind closed doors. He saw the man more often. Not just in screens now, but in dreams, in shadows, in the corner of his eye. The voice began to speak without. "The television. You let me in. You promised." "Promised what?" Peter whispered in the dark. "That I could stay." He stayed awake for days. The sleeping pills sat untouched. He didn't trust what would happen if he let himself drift off. Still, sleep came. In the dream, Peter stood in front of a static screen. The man waited, silent, watching. "You called me," the man said. "You asked me to take the pain away." Peter shook his head. "You wanted someone to protect you," the man continued. "From your father, from the fists, from the cold." Peter's knees buckled. Images flashed, forgotten memories. A belt, a locked closet, hands too strong. "You let me in, you let me help, and then you forgot." Peter sobbed. "What are you?" The man leaned closer. His breath sounded like television snow. "I'm the part you gave away." Peter didn't. "Go back to work." He smashed the televisions, ripped the wires from the walls. But the man didn't leave. The whispers followed him to the grocery store, to the library, into the woods behind his house. Everywhere, he was unraveling. In the mirror, his eyes looked hollow. He hadn't eaten in days. His fingernails were black, around the edges. And then, the mirror flickered. The man in the static stood behind him. Peter spun around. No one there. But when he looked back at the mirror, the man was still there, smiling. "You let me in," he said. "Now let me out." The next night, Peter stood in front of the empty frame of his television. He held a box cutter in his hand. The voice was loud, not whispering anymore, but speaking in full, deep, resonant, a voice that echoed with old promises. Let me out. Just a little blood. Just a crack. No, Peter said. The air around him buzzed. The light dimmed. The walls pulsed with static. You're tired, the voice said. Let me carry you again, like before. I didn't know what I was doing, Peter whispered. But you did, the voice replied. You knew exactly what you wanted. You wanted me to hurt them, so I did. Do you want to see? The screen glowed. Peter watched as old footage played. His father, drunk, screaming, and then static. A sudden cut. His father slumped against the wall, blood on his head. Peter at 6, standing silently in front of the TV. You helped me, he said. I did what you asked. The man stepped from the screen. Not literally, but fully formed in Peter's mind now, as though a boundary had finally broken. He stood in the room, flickering at the edges, but solid in the center. Peter dropped. The knife. I can't live like this, he said. You don't have to, the man replied. Just give me the rest. What do you mean? The man extended a hand. Long fingers, blackened at the tips. Let me take what's left. Peter hesitated, then reached out, their fingers touched. The next morning, the house was quiet. Neighbors would later say they hadn't seen Peter in weeks. Mail piled up, lights always off. Eventually, the police were called. They found the house empty. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Just one strange thing. Every mirror in the house was shattered, and the televisions, all of them, were turned on, tuned to static. In one of the screens, if you stood just right, you could see something. A man, standing in the fog, smiling,